Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa, and we're going to be talking about Microsoft Loop, which is our new collaborative workspace app that we just launched to faculty, staff, and students last week. Today, we have Josh Gural, who's our O365 Product Manager, and he's going to be walking us through exactly what Loop is and the different use cases of how you can use it here at Weill Cornell. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know I am recording today's session. So if you want to review anything again, or even share this with some of your colleagues who may be interested in using Loop and couldn't attend today's session, you'll get a follow-up email from me with a link to the recording, as well as some other guides and things that might be useful as you get started with Loop. And we do have a lot of people registered for today's session, so I do have everyone's microphones on mute just to prevent any background distractions. But if you have any questions at any time during the session, please feel free to post it in the chat or just raise your hand if you'd like to come off the mic, and we'll just kind of manage that as we go through the session. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Josh. Thanks for joining us today, Josh.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vanessa. Thanks everyone for joining. I think this will be a fun session today. And I like to keep these pretty casual, low key. So if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat. Like Vanessa said, she's going to be monitoring for me, and we'll stop the session if anything gets put in there that needs addressed with the group as a whole. So I see the numbers are still going up. That's fun. We'll get started though with some introductions. I am Josh Gural, Product Manager for Microsoft 365 here at Weill Cornell, and we're going to be talking about Microsoft Loop. So we have a pretty packed agenda today, but I'm going to try to speed through a lot of these slides as quick as I can. It's mainly just for reference for you guys, so you can take a look at this after the fact if you want, the quick start guide, things like that. But in general, we're going to talk about what is Loop, the three different parts of Loop, how to get started with Loop. We're going to talk about a couple use cases. We're going to answer some questions specifically like the comparison to OneNote. How is Loop different than OneNote, and how is it the same? And then finally, we're going to do a slide of resources for you guys to take a look at after the session if you'd like to learn more. And then, of course, a live demo of Loop itself. All right, so first and foremost, what is Loop? Loop is a versatile tool designed by Microsoft, of course, to help teams collaborate more effectively. I like to think of it like a flexible workspace that brings together content from any number of Microsoft applications and tools, right? So whether you are in Loop itself, which we'll see today, or whether you're in email or whether you're in Teams, it doesn't really matter. The information that's there is flexible. It is up to date, real time. You can access it on the web, you can access it on your phone, you can access it on your tablet, etc. And no matter what application you're using, Loop in the background make sure everything is up to date. The one use case I like to put in everybody's heads as we get started with this is as you're having a meeting, perhaps you'll use Loop to take meeting notes, and then you send those action items and meeting notes after the fact, right, in an email. The minute you send that, it becomes irrelevant, right? Because somebody will check something off the list and they'll have to either send another email saying, hey, I did this, or, reply to somebody directly and check something off the list or add something that they may have missed to the notes, etc. Loop kind of solves that problem by maybe you're taking notes in Loop during the meeting, but when you go into your email, those notes are live, even in Outlook, right? And those notes are live even in Teams. So no matter where you're touching the note, it'll get updated to make sure you have the most up-to-date information at any point in time. Loop has three parts. So Loop as a whole can be thought of in three distinct areas. The first and biggest, going to smallest, is workspaces. Workspaces are the heart of Loop. Everything lives in a workspace. You can think of it like a central hub where you organize everything related to your workspace. So it could be by project, it could be by type of note you're taking. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the demo of different ways you can organize your notes. It's really up to you on how best makes sense to organize your notes, but workspaces is the highest level of organization, where everything else is saved. Next, one level down, we have pages. This one should be pretty familiar, right? Pages are, Microsoft likes to call it dynamic canvases, right? So you click on any part of the page, you can add text, media, tables. You can integrate with things like Microsoft Planner. It allows your think of it like a notebook page, right? So the workspace is a notebook, a page is a page in that notebook. And then finally, we have components. So components are the different areas within a page. And the neat thing about components is each one can be shared independently of the rest. So if you have meeting notes, perhaps you want to share the agenda with your manager or share the agenda with the person you're giving a one-on-one with. They won't have access to anything else other than that one component if you share just the component. Alternatively, you can share the entire page. Maybe you want to interact with somebody totally on that page, you can do so. And then, of course, if we go back up to the top, you can share a workspace with someone. So if you're working on a project, you want a number of people working on that project together with you to have access to everything, you can share at any level of Loop, which is very handy, I think. Any questions so far?
None in the chat yet.
All right. So quick start guide, you should have access to Loop today. Oh, I do see one in the chat, and can it replace OneNote entirely? That's up to you. Microsoft is not going to yet, at least I have not heard anything, remove OneNote in any way. This is a separate application from OneNote altogether, and we'll talk about a comparison actually in a couple slides. But as of right now, it is a separate application, though for your use case, it may be able to replace Loop entirely, depending on if you like that that user interface better, which I do, or if the sharing capabilities and up-to-date real-time sync is something attractive to you. So we'll see that in 1 minute. So quick start guide, getting started. Everybody should have access today. You can access Loop at loop.microsoft.com. If you don't have access, let me know. But I did a number of tests and you should. So as long as you're signing in with your WCM seaweed and password, you should have access starting today. You can create workspaces. We'll talk about templates in a minute. We already talked about pages and components. Pages you'll see a demo of in a second. It's really easy to add a page. Component uses the slash command for quick content. So we'll see that again in the demo, of course, but the slash command and the @ symbol command are two very important ones to know. Slash gives you access to things like different headers, charts, or not charts, I should say tables, different integrations, etc. @ command is files or people, right? So if you wanted to @ mention a specific person to get their attention, or you wanted to @ mention a file, you can do so for reference. And then we'll also see the sharing and collaboration part as well. I'm going to use Vanessa as my guinea pig in the real live demo, so you can see how you can share components, pages, and workspaces. All right, so I mentioned we're going to talk about the comparison to OneNote because I know that is a big question that you guys may be thinking. There are there are definitely some similarities between Loop and OneNote. However, there are some differences, right? So as I mentioned, there's no knowledge that I have that OneNote is going away. It is a totally separate application, and I'm not going to read this entire chart to you. But a couple things I wanted to highlight. There are some use cases where Loop and OneNote can be used for the same thing, and it really boils down to a personal preference with you and your team of what is best. At its core, Loop is meant for collaboration and sharing, right? It's not required. You can have a workspace that's totally your own. All the notes are totally your own. You have no intention of ever sharing those with anybody, and that's fine. OneNote is kind of the opposite, right? OneNote is at its core meant for your notes. However, it can be shared with individuals if you want. So if you're definitely going to be sharing with a number of people and you want real-time live collaboration on those notes, Loop is probably the way to go. If you want just your own content, OneNote may be the preferred option depending on which user interface and features you like best. It really boils down to a personal preference. Integration is another one. Deep integration with Loop. So like I said, if you send a Loop component within Teams, Outlook, etc., it's going to be live, right? So you'll see it. It's actually really cool. People can touch, feel it wherever, no matter what application they're using. OneNote, it doesn't have that. However, obviously with OneNote being a Microsoft product as well, it is very, very integrated with the Microsoft ecosystem. And perhaps the most important here is that offline access, right? So Loop is meant to be a a online application, if you will, right? So with internet access, either Wi-Fi or cellular signal, you do have some limited access offline, but there is a ton of integrations built into Loop that really will handicap the service if it doesn't have an internet connection. Whereas OneNote has strong offline capabilities. So that would be one area if you are going to be in an area where you don't have internet connection or a phone service connection, OneNote may be the way to go in that regard. So we'll take a look at what Loop looks like, and I think you'll be able to see kind of the differences. A lot of individuals like to think of it like the product Notion. If you use Notion, there's a lot of similarities between Loop and Notion, just a different way to take notes, a different mentality of note taking. All right, so I'm not going to read all these use cases to you for sake of giving more time for the demo, but I just wanted to put in some different use cases. So here we have faculty members. I have one for medical students if you're on the call, administrative staff, and IT support staff. Of course, if you attended my last Tech Tuesday, Copilot helped me write these, right? So I can't necessarily think of all of these different use cases on my own because I myself am IT support staff, so I was able to generate some of those myself. But here's just some thoughts to get you started. So, if you're a faculty member, curriculum development, research projects, planning meetings or taking meeting notes, that's one that's going to be similar for all of them. Great use cases for Loop. For medical students, if there are any on the call, coordinating group projects, again, with the sharing capability, you send a component in an email. It's live across the board, no matter where any individuals touch it. Organizing rotation schedules, clinical rotation schedules, preparing for exams, note-taking, flashcards, documents, revisions, super handy for that for medical students if you're on the call. Administrative staff, planning and executing events. You'll see an example of that one here shortly, where I'm going to, in the demo, plan this Tech Tuesday after the fact with Vanessa, and you'll see kind of how that works. Managing important documents, you'll see how we can integrate documents within the Loop interface as well, and also distributing updates and announcements efficiently. Policy updates is a big one, right? If you wanted to have some policies in there for everybody to review, definitely handy for that. Finally, IT support staff, of which I am a member, of course. Ticket management and troubleshooting. Obviously, there's better solutions for full-blown ticket management, but if it's a small project that you want some ticket management with like project management light, such as Microsoft Planner, Loop is a great way to do that, right? You can have notes taken with the ticket management right integrated inside that same document. Training documents, planning these projects like this one, which we'll see in a second, great use cases for IT staff. I do see some questions, and I think we're changing topics here to resources, so I'll take a quick peek. Yes, documents live in OneDrive/SharePoint, right? So everything here you can think of as a similar tool to OneNote or Excel or Word, etc. All of it lives within the Microsoft ecosystem. AI integration, good question. So right now with our license tier that everybody has, there's limited AI built into Loop. It is a brand new product. So I will say I would be stunned if there isn't going to be some more integration built into Microsoft Loop eventually. As of right now, it is quite limited. There is a recap feature that's actually kind of cool. So as you take notes, updated document, whatever, you can use a recap feature to figure out what happened since the last time, and that is included with our base license tier. There is some more advanced license tier that are available, but we're not there yet. So with the current license tier, there's some minimal AI integration. However, I found, and you'll see in the demo today, Loop is a great way to take information you get from Copilot Enterprise, put information in Loop for sharing that. So as you guys know, if you listen to my last Tech Tuesday, Copilot Enterprise does not currently have a history, right? So once you enter that request and then leave the page, there should be no mentality that's going to be there when you come back. Loop is a great way to take that information and plop it into Loop for long-term storage, which you'll see in a second. And Michelle's question, yes, there is version control, very similar to any other Microsoft product. You can go back in time, forward in time, etc. Okay. Inside Teams, will the dependence on OneNote be moved to Loop? I will say sort of. There is still OneNote notebooks integrated, deeply integrated within Teams, and that has no intention on going away. However, meeting notes, what used to be the Teams wiki, is being replaced with Loop. So wiki does no longer exist. It may still be read-only for now, I believe, but you cannot create new wikis. They're retiring that service and moving it into Loop. I think for good reason. It's very similar to what a wiki was, with just way more features. So that piece of it is going to be changed, but the integration of the notebook will not be changed. I see one more question pop in. It is possible to share Loop inside and outside NYP or WCM with NYP, as long as your external party is an approved party. Of course, NYP is. You should not have any issues sharing Loop components. However, I will say Loop would have to be enabled on that external entity as well. So keep that in mind. If they don't have access to Loop, if you share them a Loop component, they may not be able to interact with it. We don't have any control over that, of course. But if they do have Loop enabled on their side, you shouldn't have any issues sharing internally or externally. All right, so resources are on the screen. We'll move forward with these slides. We're almost done with the slides and pop over for the demo. Use these resources to get started. There's a lot of good information in here. The hardest part about Loop when I started with it is just staring at a blank page and figuring out how you want to interact with the product. How do you want to organize your stuff? How do you want to keep everything organized, like even within the page? How do you want to set up your templates? What template do you want to use? Well, how many workspaces do you want? What should those workspaces contain? Don't let that hinder you. I would start with just like a sandbox type environment and just start taking notes in there, and it'll naturally evolve on how you like to organize your notes, and they can be moved around after the fact. But these resources are a great way to get started with that information. And then finally, we have a demo. So I'm going to play this little clip here. There should be no audio on that, so I'm just going to let that play while I get my demo spun up. Give me 1 second. While that finishes, I think it's only like 2 minutes. I'll take a peek at the rest of them here. Oh, yes, you can link OneNote to Loop components, absolutely. As far as lost, you're not going to lose anything. OneNote's not going away. If it is in the future, that'll definitely be well communicated, although there is you should have no fear that OneNote is going to be replaced by Loop at this point. So keep that in mind. However, yes, you can link OneNote into Loop. So if you have a specific OneNote page that you want to reference in Loop, you can do so, and we'll take a look at that. Maybe not OneNote specifically, but it works the same way with other Microsoft file types. Is Cornell Ithaca using this product as well? I'm not sure about that, actually. I'll get back to you on that. I do think that it is on the roadmap. I don't know if they are enabling it right now. So we might not be lockstep with the deployment, but I'll find out for you. Okay, so I'm going to skip over the rest of this for sake of a live demo. Give me 1 second. Great, gonna reshare. Vanessa, can you just let me know that I got the right screen up here?
I see your O365 account.
Got it. Good. Okay. It was being weird for a second, but I think we're all set. All right. So we're going to talk about how to get to Loop first, of course. Loop.microsoft.com is the easiest way to do that. You can also access it if you just go to portal.office.com or Microsoft365.com. Click on the little 3 dots. If you don't see it in here, go into More Apps, and you'll find it in here as well. You can see I have it open here. This is what it looks like in my test account. Um, Very simple user interface by design. So at the top, you'll see your different workspaces. You'll see recent stuff and then ideas. Ideas is just a page without a workspace or a component without a workspace. So if you just want to plop something in there really quick, quick kind of scratch pad type notes, if you will, you can put notes in the ideas section. You can then link them to a workspace after the fact if it grows into a point of a full-blown project, for instance. So maybe you're discussing internally to figure out who is working with a specific project. You want to see if this idea even has merit. You could put it in an idea. You could still share and things like that. But then if that goes into a full-blown project, you can link it into a workspace after the fact. And you could view it different ways over on the right-hand side here, either as a list or kind of an icon view. But we're just going to get started with a brand new workspace, kind of start from the beginning. So at the very top here, you'll see create new workspace. And I'm going to call this Tech Tuesday. Tech Tuesday, yeah. You can give it an icon. I actually like to give it icons. It makes it a visual way to kind of see what's going on. So maybe we'll do like a little graduation cap. You can also update the cover if you want. Again, kind of just helpful ways to see the content, especially as you get more workspaces. A visual kind of view of what this is may be handy. Right at the beginning, you can share a workspace if you want. I'm not going to do that. It's just going to be a personal workspace for now. Next, it's going to ask me if there's any files that I want to integrate with the workspace at the beginning. This may or may not be applicable for you. This is my test account, so there's a lot more or a lot fewer files that are in this test account. But as this searches through, it'll find things that may or may not be referenced for this specific project. This is the presentation we're giving today. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. Note it is looking inside the file and saw that there's Tech Tuesday. You can add more keywords here if you want as well, but I'm just going to select this one for now and say create workspace. So this is the page section of a Loop workspace. So you'll see here will take us back to the home page if we want. And on the sidebar, there's a number of interesting areas here. You can minimize or expand the sidebar if you want, kind of simple there. You can see recent and ideas quickly at the top, but then if you see this little banner, this will be everything within this workspace. So the Tech Tuesday workspace has this presentation that I just linked, and then also a page to start with called Untitled to begin with. And you can view this as a tree, so it's organized by the way you put it, and also activity. So basically by what was last touched. We'll just leave it tree for now. If I click on this, it'll forward me directly to the presentation we just saw. So you can integrate that directly. I find that super handy, right? So if we're going to be talking about Loop, having this in here is nice and easy to be able to just quickly go there and interact with the PowerPoint. And you can do that same thing for anything basically that's stored within the 365 environment, be it a Excel, be it a PowerPoint, OneNote notebook, any images that are stored in OneNote or OneDrive, all of that is applicable. So what I plan to do here is talk about Loop. So we have a Tech Tuesday workspace. Let's give it a Loop header. And this is going to be for May 21, 24, right? So now at a glance, you can see that over here. I'm going to move this here and make a sub page. So you can see sub pages are collapsible. Another way to organize your pages. And you can have as many as you want in here. You can make a sub page if you wanted. And we'll talk some about these other options in a minute. So to start with, you'll see you can add an icon and a cover on a page as well. I'm not going to do that for sake of time, but on a page, you can add the same icon or cover. I do recommend doing it for real because it gives you, again, a visual way to see where you're at. I find it actually very helpful. At first, I thought it was kind of gimmicky, but it is very helpful to be able to see, what this specific page is at a glance. And And again, we could just start typing here like it says, or I could do the slash or the @ command to get some further information. So if I do a slash command, it'll bring up all of the options available to me. You can see it's quite extensive, and we'll touch on a good number of these here in this demo. But I'm going to start with table of contents. So note it's telling me add heading to create different table of contents. I like to put that at the top just because it's a quick way to organize my information. So we'll put that right at the top. And then let's do a header, and we'll call this date, right? So when are we going to be doing this? It is today at 12 p.m. Nessa sent me the co-host link. And maybe I could paste that link there. I don't have it handy, but I'll just put this in there for fun. You can see how it'll like make it look a little bit fancier. Cool. So let's then put in maybe another header. Presenters. So maybe for this one, I want a checklist, and I know I'm going to do it. So I'll put at me, at Vanessa, and something interesting is going to happen there. I want to show you. I know my manager, Raphael, is on the call helping as well. So we'll put those as the presenters now. But notice it has this little red alert telling me, hey, this person does not have access to this specific page. So I could give them access here very simply just by hitting the plus. And I can share and notify if I want, but you don't have to, right? If you just wanted to @mention them for maybe in the future, if you want to give them access, that's fine. Or if you're just referencing them, that's fine as well. For now, I'm not going to add them. So you'll see, even though I'm @mentioning them, they are marked as red because they do not have access. If I @mention them at this point, they get no notifications. If I would hit that plus button, they would get a notification letting them know I shared that with them. And then every time I @mention them moving forward, they would get a notification. And we'll see that in 1 second. Here, just a couple other items to note. There is checklists, which is what I made up here. So maybe I want to say that these people did attend. So I'll check them off. There's, what's the other one I wanted to call out? Oh, images is probably a good one to talk about, right? You could insert images. You can record video in here. Maybe that video that I linked could have been put in loop if I wanted to. Planner we'll talk about in a second. We talked about @mentioning. Yeah, so let's move to some notes, right? So maybe we want to do a heading for notes. And let's do a subheader of speaker notes. And notice at the top, this table of contents is building for me, which is super, super handy. I think that's why I usually start with that. And then maybe I want to do a code block. I don't know, plain text, just to put my notes in a separate view to make it look a little bit different. We'll do that just to show you the functionality. And then for speaker notes, similar to what I did for this presentation, I'm going to switch over to Copilot, and I'm going to put this prompt that I built. Notice it's quite extensive. I'm saying I'm giving an hour-long presentation for Loop, mix of technical, non-technical professionals in a medical school environment. It's going to generate a presentation outline for this session. I told it what I wanted to include. I wanted to put, what is Loop, getting started, comparison to OneNote in a table specifically. I wanted to include bullet points so I can copy and paste in my presentation, and at least 3 references, one of which from Microsoft Learn, and 4 bullet points per section. So I'm just going to let that generate. This is, by the way, what I did to help form this presentation, which is super handy. We'll get that a second. Cool. All right, so I will take all of this information and put it in my speaker notes. So again, based on a conversation or a question that was provided earlier, this is a great use case of Loop, right? So you have AI generate speaker notes for you, and then you can paste it in here for review. Now that's just plain text again, because I picked plain text, but you could paste it directly in here as well if you wanted to, and it gives it a better view. It will actually do the headers based on what it thinks you're doing, and note it's building that up here as well. It's a little bit messed up because I put that over here. So if I wanted to, I could change this to a different header, but for now, for sake of argument, it's fine. It will fancy up your links, which I think is handy, so you don't have that big long glob of URL. It'll fancy it up for you, which is nice, and it'll also copy paste tables. So notice that table, it actually put it in a nice table for me. I can drag and drop, I can insert, I can sort, things like that. I think is very handy as well. So next, definitely what I want to do is have Vanessa review this for me. So if I click on this, we're going to talk about a component. A component's something that I think is the most powerful part. I'm actually going to do, nope. I'm going to do a collapsible heading for this one, because then I can open it up and close it as I want. I'll paste that back in there. And then you can, whoops, I didn't copy. Try that again. You can add different sections into here as you like, right? So I'm going to paste that in. And what I want to do is share this with Vanessa. Actually, let's just say I want to share this table with Vanessa. So you can see even within this big glob of notes, maybe I just want Vanessa to take a look at this comparison to OneNote table for me. So just to show that you can share the whole workspace if you wanted to, you could share a whole page if you wanted to, but then you could just share a subsection of that page, which is called a component. So I want to share as a new component. It'll give this fancy little purple blob around here, right? And it'll tell me that it's now a component, and I can just copy this component. It's going to warn you, hey, only people with existing access have access. Keep that in mind. Yes, I'm aware. You can also see who has access and see what locations are available right at the top. But I'm going to go over to here. Notice I did get an email when I alerted myself. And if I open this up, this is the component or the page that I was building just now. And you can scroll through, and you can see I can make changes live within Outlook, and that will, wherever I put that, yep, be added live real time here as well. That's one of the more powerful features, I think, especially for meeting notes, right? So if you wanted after the fact notes put in there, even within this email, right? This is just Outlook. This is just an email. Because it is a Loop component, you can edit it right in here. You don't have to switch to Loop to, check off things that you completed, to add any other notes that you have, things like that. Super handy. But anyway, I want to send a new email. Comparison table for Loop versus OneNote. Hey, Vanessa, can you review this for me? I'm not sure it's good enough quite yet. Then I'll paste in that component, and you can see it'll do its little purple fanciness, right? Make sure it does that. It'll get all of your features that I just talked about where you can edit stuff live. But notice this red button, if you will, here, right? This is the same as the red button we talked about here. It's warning you that, hey, if you're sending this to this person, they don't have access to the component that you just pasted in here. So if I click on that, it'll tell me that, hey, Vanessa does not have access to this specific component. I can manage the access here, or what I like to do is change this to recipients of this message. Can view, I'm going to give her edit access. Now the red goes away, it's now blue, everything looks good, and I'm going to send it away. So Vanessa is now going to get an email, and she'll be able to interact with that live in this component. So Vanessa, when you get that email, if you can just start making some changes to that, whether I'm here, I should be able to see it, As you could see, she just logged in. She's typing. This is just in my sent box, right? I don't have to go to Loop to see what she's doing. I could, right? I could go back to Loop, scroll down here. I could see that she's updating it live here. I can see it here. If I would open Teams and paste it in a Teams message, the same thing applies, right? So she is editing this live. This is my favorite feature because this could be, like I mentioned, after meeting notes, or takeaway action items. I don't have to send another email. Everybody gets enough emails, right? I don't have to send another email that says, "Hey Josh, did you complete this task yet?" I can just look in my sent and say, "Oh, okay, this was assigned to Josh, and yes, they're working on it," right? Another use case, I'm just going to go to this other tab that I have here, and I'll say action items, and I'll say I want to do a task list. This is one that I use all the time, right? Especially for a meeting. Better yet, I'll just create a new page and show you two birds, one stone. There's these templates at the bottom, right? And you can go to template gallery to see all of them. There's 24 of them currently. You can save your own templates if you like. But these are the ones that are out of the box. Meeting notes is one of them, and it also gives you this task list at the bottom. So two birds, one stone, we'll use that template, and we'll say meeting notes, Tech Tuesday. I could put the attendee list in here if I wanted to, or I could just paste it after the fact, if I'm going to pull it from Zoom or Teams. You can give it a topic, so you could share this in advance. Yes, I love the bad idea brainstorm. I actually use that one. It's kind of funny. I think it's just brainstorming, but we had that laugh last week too. So this gives you a place to start. And notice they use emojis a lot. I kind of like it because at a glance, I can see that this is attendees. I can see this is the agenda, the tasks, etc. You can, if you don't like them, delete it and save it as your own template, custom template, if you like. But just to further my point here, we'll click on these little dots here, and we'll say share as new component for the task list. It's going to think for a second, and I'm going to do the same thing and copy that component. But first, I'm going to say test loop. I'm going to assign it to Vanessa. It's going to yell at me, and I'm going to ignore it for now. I'm going to say you have to do it today. We'll talk about bucket in a second. I'm going to say test loop. Also, I'm going to assign it to Raphael. And I'm going to give him till tomorrow. And I'm going to take this component, even though it's red, and I'm going to go into my email again. Hi at Raf. And at Vanessa. Please review these action items from our Tech Tuesday meeting. Thanks, Josh. Okay. I'm going to fix my misspelling because I can't type and talk at the same time. And I'm going to paste that loop component in there. And again, it's going to yell at me like you saw before. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to change this to recipients of the message. Whoops, I need to fix. I want them to be able to edit. There we go. And if you hover over that, you can see that it says what permissions I gave it, or click to get a further explanation. So I'm going to send that away now that I'm blue, not red. And they will be able to see that. And again, I'll ask one or both of you to take a peek at that live here so you can see some changes. Maybe I also want to assign something to myself. Now you can see Vanessa did what she needs to do, which is great. Oops, I picked my actual self, not my test self. There we go. And I'll say by Friday, I need to do that. So notice in here, it's actually live. People are going in and making changes. Vanessa already checked it off. So in this email, I could just go back to this email and see, okay, Vanessa did it. I don't have to email her and say, hey, did you do this? She could say yes. She doesn't have to email me and say, yes, I did it. We could just see that this is happening without having to change any applications, without having to reach out to her. It's integrated because of this loop component. And I could see all that here. Again, if I put it in Teams, I could see it there, and I can also see it here as well. Note that it is syncing to Planner, so you will be able to see these items in your Planner board as well, or your My Day view if you add it to My Day. So it's highly integrated with Microsoft applications. Because it is a Planner board, you can also view it as a board view, right? So you could add a different grouping, say action item. That makes sense because they're all action items, but I'll do it just for fun. And you can drag and drop it over into different buckets if you like. And I think that's pretty much it. It's really flexible, I will say. A lot of people, just to give you kind of some information, a lot of people build workspaces based on projects. I think that's the way that Vanessa, you're doing it, right? So you have different workspaces for different projects. That's
Yes.
totally perfect. Um, I like to do it based on week. So I have one workspace for all of my meeting notes. Because again, pages can be shared independently, so I don't share the workspace with anybody but myself, obviously. And then the pages I share inside of there. I like to keep them all together, and then I have a header for like the week. So I'll say, for instance, new page. I'll title it week of May 20th, 2024. And then what I like to do here is I like to do actions from this week, actions going into next week. And so here, just for my one-on-one purposes with my manager, if there's any big action items, I like to put it in here just so I'll remember to tell them about it, or if I have any questions, worked on ticket, maybe I'll paste in a ticket number, things like that. And as I'm doing my one-on-one, I can check them off. So I just have a note of what needs to be talked about in the one-on-one. And then I also like actions going into next week, right? So we'll do a checklist for anything on Friday. I like to do this Friday afternoon. I'm like, hey, I need a prep for Tech Tuesday next week. I need to complete ticket ABC, etc. Right? This is how I like to view it. And then under here, I'll make a subpage, meeting notes, and I'll say, usually I do the date, so like 5/24 or 21, Tech Tuesday. That's how I like to view it, right? Then I can collapse the different weeks. If I think, oh, I remember I talked with this person last week, I can go to there, or 4 weeks ago, I can do that. This is typically how I arrange my notes, but it's super flexible to how you like it. All of these templates can be customized if you don't like a specific section. I think it's a very neat tool. You can see it's similar but different than OneNote, so there's no idea, there's no plans for that service to be removed. But I do think it is very handy that you can see this from literally anywhere. Any changes that you make sync across the entirety of the platform. And with that, Vanessa, do you think I missed anything before I open it up to more questions and demo?
I think you covered most of it. We have a ton of questions in the chat. We do have a question about PHI. If you
Hmm.
could talk about whether PHI is allowed within your Loop account.
Great question. So, with Loop, now I'm not our compliance department, so I would refer to them for specific information, of course, but in general, in my layman understanding, Loop definitely is stored within OneDrive for Business / SharePoint. So it is to be thought of as no different than an Excel file or a OneNote file or Word file, right? So with the information in your head that you can share, similar to you can share with Excel, etc. There should be no difference between our PHI stance between anything in OneDrive. So I would say we are HIPAA compliant in that regard.
We do have a question about how to search for content in Loop. Like once you've built all of this information or put all these workspaces together, how do you find it later on?
Great question. So I will say the first part of that is organization. So make sure you organize correctly. I almost never search for things in Loop. Now I'm sure that will change as I get more and more and more and more information within Loop. But because of the way I organize my life within Loop in weeks, I typically organize my workspace to be meeting notes. I have the week of here, and then I just manually find what I'm looking for. However, Loop obviously has search capabilities within it. You can search all pages and workspaces for a keyword. If you just hit this search icon here, there's also a search icon here. And it's searching all of your pages and workspaces. So if I would type in Loop, you could see text on all pages. It'll highlight recent pages at the top. That was probably a bad example because Loop, I think, is on all the pages, but maybe tasks will show just this specific ones that I added here. So that'd be how you search. Great question.
There was a question about whether you can have linked O360 files open via the desktop application rather than just the web version that you showed earlier.
That's a good question. So again, I typically use web applications mostly. I know they had a bad reputation in the past for good reason. I think it's pretty powerful now. So I pretty much interact with the web version only. I actually do use the web version of Outlook as well, though everything I talked about today does work in the desktop app as well, both Mac and PC. However, you can link Loop components here. It will open in the web, but the easiest way to open that in the desktop app is this button here. I would probably discourage trying to link a desktop app itself because that link's going to be unique based on how the person's interacting with it. Maybe they already have it synced with the OneDrive sync tool, and if you do it, it'll get messy. So I would let it be the online version here, and then if you prefer to open it in the desktop app, do so. Though any small changes, I think, are pretty quick and easy to do in the web app. Great question.
There's a question about when you add external users to your Loop workspace or component or whatever it is, can they be added as read only and not full participants?
Yes, so I actually made that mistake when I sent almost made the mistake when I sent this one, right? When you're sending a component, you can do it here or you can do it here within the component itself. You'll, by default, everybody will be given read, right? So let me just show you that here with this attendees one, for instance. If I wanted to share just this attendees name, which I don't know why I would do, but for sake of argument, if I copy this component and I want to send it to Vanessa, when I paste it, it's going to say she doesn't have access. If I modify that access and say, like I did before, recipients of this message, it's going to ask me what type of setting I want to give them. By default, it's view. I made the change to edit. Obviously, you'd want to do that for things like action items, but if you just want them to view, you can do that as well, and then send it away.
Another question, since this is so similar to Notion, does Loop offer capabilities to download or import templates?
Good question. So in comparison to Notion, I know we have a good amount of Notion users here at the university. There are some pluses and minuses for sure. I will say you can save a template, but you'll need to create it in Loop first. So if you wanted to create a blank page, frame it the way you want, and then you right click and say save page as template, and that'll be a custom template just for you. Those 24 templates are just for just like to get started, if you will. But you can customize your template as much as you want within Loop. So I don't know about importing per se, but you can create it here and then save it for reuse in the future. I did that myself in my Loop account with this meeting notes one, right? I kind of liked it, although I didn't like this because I don't have a use for it, though. I saw some people putting like the high level summary of what the meeting is going to be about, and then different topics here in a bullet. But then there's also the agenda. So I didn't really I didn't really drive with this or jive with this necessarily. So I took this, removed this section, and made some tweaks to it, and did it on my own, and then saved that one as my own meeting template. You can absolutely do that. You can also export these. It is saved within um, just lost my train of thought. It is saved within OneNote, so no, OneDrive, sorry, and you can share and export and move them around within OneDrive as you would any other document. But I know somebody also asked about the version history. While I'm here, you'll be able to see that because it is saved in OneDrive. All of your version history will be available, and you can restore it as you want. Great question.
There's
Oh, the other thing with Notion, sorry, this is included with our license tier, right? If you have an A3 or an A5 license tier, this is included at no extra cost. So I know Notion does have a cost associated with it, depending on the tier that you have. If that is a concern, Loop is totally free.
There's a question about how Loop is different from Teams. So I guess when would you use one over the other?
That's a good question. Teams is so they are sort of different, but I get the question of how they can be the same, right? So Teams is for a connection of a ton of different information, right? Teams has different channels that you can have different information in with posts and with files and file storage, etc. Loop is similar, but it is at its core a note-taking application, right? So posts is for communication. Think of it like I hate to say this, but your Facebook wall, right? But for a project. So you're saying, hey, this is what I'm doing today. Hey, can you help me with this? Blah, blah, blah. Loop is made more for a note taking at its core, but you can integrate things like files. But this file would be best stored in Teams, right? So you'd have a set of files in Teams, you'd have posts in Teams, etc. Loop may be a component you want to paste in there and say, hey, here's our meeting notes from this week. Paste that within Teams and they can interact with it in the post section of Teams without having to go to Loop itself. So it's just a separate technology. Loop is more for note taking and note collaboration. Teams is for general collaboration for a number of different areas within the 365 stack.
And I know we're running a little over, so I'm going to take one more question from the chat, but I'll send the entire chat record to Josh just in case there's anything I miss and we can respond to it in the follow-up email. There is a question about, I guess, what is the best way if somebody has a OneNote and they want to integrate it in some way with their Loop account? What do you recommend the best way of doing that?
Yeah, so that would be very similar to this item here, right? So this is a PowerPoint presentation. In my test, my test account, I don't know that I have a OneNote notebook, but you can integrate anything that's in your OneDrive, right? So if you have a OneNote notebook, you could link it here. If you're thinking of moving from OneNote to Loop, I did. I'll just tell you that point blank. I like this interface a lot better. It's more streamlined for me. It just makes more sense in my head. It's not a requirement. Again, it's OneNote is not going away. But if you like this better, what I did is I said, okay, I'm going to start with Loop to see if I like it and take all of my notes this week in Loop. I did that. It was a success. So from there, I had two choices. One, I can migrate all of my notes from OneNote to Loop, basically copy and paste is the best way to do that because you need to organize it differently between Loop and OneNote, right? There's no notebook concept, although that's kind of a workspace, but etc. There's no automated way to do that. So I copied and pasted a lot of my notes. But for some historical notes, like notes from when I started at the organization coming up on a year ago, things like that, those notes weren't necessarily applicable for my day-to-day anymore, but there's stuff that I wanted to keep around. You can just link your OneNote here. So maybe in those meeting notes like I had, the top, you could link your OneNote notebook and just say, this is for any historical information, and then start fresh with Loop if you would like to move forward with it.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you everybody for staying a little longer. I know we're just a little bit over to learn more about Loop. Like I said, I do have this recorded. So if you signed in a little late, I'll be sure to send a follow-up email with a link to this recording and a bunch of different links to some guides to get started with Loop. If you have any additional questions about Loop after this, just reply back to the email I sent, and I'll try to answer it. And if I can't, I'll hand it over to Josh or Raphael, who also joined us a little later. And one of them can definitely, provide the information you're looking for. So thank you all again for joining our session, learning more about Loop. Hope you get enough information now to test it and see how you like it, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.